Thanks for taking the time to check out this Take Control of Your Headshots series. In this video, we're going to look at preparing for a successful headshot session. Now, you might say, isn't it the photographer's job to make the shoot go well? And the answer is yes and no. Firstly, headshots are a significant investment in your career, so it makes sense to really do some detailed preparation, whether that's thinking about your casting types, clothing choices, or hair and makeup thoughts. Secondly, it's about briefing the photographer. A headshot session is a lot like getting a haircut. You need to brief the photographer and tell them what you want, otherwise you'll get an off-the-peg shoot. I would say do prepare carefully, but don't obsess about it, because you want to be able to work organically on the day of the shoot with your photographer. So, here's an 8-point checklist to preparing for a successful headshot session. 1. Reflect on your casting types. Think about the roles you've got, the roles you haven't got. Think about the roles you'd like to get and would never get. And if you go to a lot of castings, you can probably reflect on how casting professionals seem to see you based on what you get called in for. Now, that's not to restrict or tie down your options in the session, but to help shape it. If you're a student, those ideas are probably going to be a bit vaguer than if you're an actor with 10 years experience. But you can still think about your playing range, your skin tone, your eye colour, your hair colour, and your personality type, even something like your height, and about how all of those things affect how you might be perceived. 2. Make a brief. Turn those casting thoughts into a brief to share with the photographer at the start of the session. Now, that might be something as vague as, I want a poetic shot, I want something that's brave, or it might be something as specific and detailed as, I want a naturally lit classical shot and I want a studio lit corporate shot. But either way, that's a great place to begin. 3. Your photographs. Take a look over your photos from previous sessions and be ready to talk to the photographer about them. It can be a really useful exercise to see what's worked and not worked and to see how you've changed over time. 4. The photographer's work. Now, it might sound obvious, but have a good look through your photographer's website and pick out a couple of photos that you particularly like. Doing that can help inform the photographer about the setup and the style that you have in mind. 5. Clothing. Now, this is a big one. In the days of black and white, it used to be about a white top, a black top, maybe a V-neck and a round neck. But the arrival of colour headshots has opened up really a wealth of possibilities. Of course, you want your headshot to be about you and not your clothes. But the little bit of top that pops into shot can still say a lot about your casting types. So, take a lot of range to the session. You want to think about contrasting necklines, contrasting colours, different shapes and different structures. And if you take that range, then between you and the photographer can work out what works best. I'm going to deal with this topic in depth in another video, but one tip is to take an item of clothing with a colour that's very sympathetic to your eye colour, because that can help them really stand out. 6. Makeup. Now, headshots are about you looking your best, styled as you would go to an audition and not for a night out. But makeup is still a powerful and subtle tool. For women, you'll almost certainly want a light base and probably some accentuation of eyes and lips, though nothing too dark and heavy. Do ask to see a test shot at the beginning of the session so you can work out if you've got the balance just right. And remember that building up your makeup over the course of a session can be a great way to differentiate looks. For men, for the most part, you're not going to need makeup, but if you do want to use some, remember less is definitely more. And for men and women, remember that Photoshop is definitely our friend. It can take care of spots, dark circles under the eyes, and temporary skin blemishes. 7. Hair. Even quite small changes in the way your hair is styled or is falling can affect how your facial structure appears or how your casting comes across. So you'll want to think carefully about hair preparation. For women, overly styled is probably not the way to go. You'll want natural, flowing feeling hair, even if that actually takes some thought and care. So for example, if you do want a classical style, showing off your neckline and cheekbone structure, then you'll probably want a loose, just thrown up feel rather than something scraped back like a ballerina. For men, how neat and tidy your hair feels or how tousled and funky it feels, even if it's quite short, can radically affect how you come across in the shot. So think carefully about it. And facial hair can also radically affect how you're perceived. A little bit of stubble can give texture. If you're fully bearded, that's a very different look, and clean shaven can often take you right down in the playing range. So make sure that you've planned for what you want and you've got the time in the session to achieve it. 8. The don'ts. Firstly, don't plan a series of very specific looks. You want to suggest rather than dictate aspects of your casting to casting professionals and producers. Secondly, don't wear anything too busy and distracting, too fashiony or too styled. And thirdly, don't get your hair cut on the day of the session, because that's not how you're going to look when you go to an average casting. So that's my 8-point checklist for preparing for a successful headshot session. As a final thought, Photoshop can take away temporary blemishes, it can remove circles under the eyes, but what it can't do is add charisma or zest or a sense of presence. Really, the best way to prepare for a headshot session is to drink lots of water, to eat healthily, and to sleep as much as you can in the run-up to your shoot day. And that's the way to prepare for the most successful headshot session.